from all of you for being with us today. And this is a webinar which is part of an initiative called Enhanceria. It's an EU-funded project that gathers 7 technical universities in Europe. These universities are NTNU, which is housed in Trondheim in Norway, Warsaw, University of Technology in Warsaw, RWTH Aachen, Technical University of Berlin, Politecnico di Milano in Italy, and UPV, which is housed in Valencia. So my name is Yashar. I'm with the Division of Entrepreneurship and Strategy at Chalmers University in Gothenburg. We organize these webinar series together with Anmar, my colleague here at Chalmers. And the inaugural webinar is going to be given by Karen Williams Middleton, who is a professor at our division, at Division of Entrepreneurship and Strategy, and she's been looking at nascent entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial behavior, and entrepreneurship education in general. And she's done a lot of qualitative work and kind of focused on creation theory and social learning theory perspectives. She's a director of School of Entrepreneurship here at Chalmers, and she's affiliated with Gothenburg International Bioscience Business School, also in Gothenburg. So she's going to share with us a paper that got recently published at Technovation. It's about these last 25 years of School of Entrepreneurship. I'm not going to steal any content from her presentation, but she's going to tell us more during this webinar. This is going to be a monthly occurrence. We're going to have next month a researcher from NTNU to share the research and practice experiences with us. And we're going to record this session, and it's going to be uploaded later on YouTube. And we're going to also distribute a form for you guys to leave your email addresses for being invited for the future webinars. So with that, I'll leave the floor or the stage, the room to Karen. Please take it away.
Thank you. He literally left the room to me because I'm actually in Yashar's room using his setup. So thank you very much, Yashar, and thank you, Anmar. And let me just check, do you see my slides? Yes, perfect. All right. Well, thank you. I think Yashar has done a very effective job of introducing me and this webinar series. So I will jump straight to what we're going to be speaking about today. And it's a very recently accepted paper to Technovation that's called Making the Whole University Entrepreneurial, Legitimacy-Building through Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship. It's a paper that I've written together with my colleague and the previous director of the School of Entrepreneurship, Mats Lundqvist. And I think when we sent out the invitation to the webinar, we sent the abstract of the paper as well. And this is what the abstract stated. So you maybe are familiar with that. And I just want to kind of highlight sort of the key components of what we're getting ourselves into in the paper. So the paper is using the School of Entrepreneurship at Chalmers University of Technology as a single case study. The school has been in existence for more than 25 years. So we have a 25-year-long single case study that has really embodied combined entrepreneurial activities. And so there we speak about not just third mission activities, but also how they integrate or collaborate with first and second missions, the missions of education or research. Research is probably the first and education the second, but let's not be pedantic about order. A unique aspect, and that's why it's in italics, of this particular case and this type of entrepreneurial activity is student surrogate entrepreneurs, or student surrogate entrepreneurship. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we go along. The school is situated at a University of Technology, just like this entire network is a network of technology universities. And I think that's important because a lot of times we think about entrepreneurial education, at least a school of entrepreneurship, we think about that primarily from a business school sense. More and more, we have different types of entrepreneurship education that look across different disciplines. But importantly, the school has been situated in a University of Technology, so it's been tapping into also aspects of entrepreneurship that associate to the third mission that's maybe more common or has specificities to a University of Technology. The paper is using this 25-year case study to really explore the intrapreneurial capability of said technical university. So how has this particular case in the School of Entrepreneurship sort of helped to transform specific activity into a more entrepreneurial capability of the university as a whole? And we used a lens of legitimacy building to really investigate how this process has emerged over 25 years. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of the scope of the paper and also the intention of the paper. Specifically, we asked the following question in the paper or article: how can adaptive entrepreneurial capabilities be achieved in universities, not just locally, such as entrepreneurship research groups, but university-wide? So this is really what we were interested in exploring through the particular case study. And connected to this, given that this is a webinar and it's not just going to be about me talking to you, I hope we can have a discussion. I think related questions for our dialogue or things to take with you, we'll see how much time we have in the end, is to consider what kind of entrepreneurial activities take place in my university. So each context is different. I think that's quite important. It's why I want to specify that it was a single case study in one particular context. And how might distinct entrepreneurial activities translate into university-wide entrepreneurial capability? I think that's probably the really interesting question that we have in front of us. And a little quick disclaimer, I've been fighting a cold, so if I sound a little sniffly or I stop and blow my nose, I apologize in advance, so bear with me. All right, so entrepreneurial activities constituting entrepreneurial universities. What do we mean by that? How should we understand that? There's lots of ways we can interpret that. So in the paper and here, I just want to give some background to how we looked at the definition of an entrepreneurial university and the type of entrepreneurial activities that we're really talking about when we talk about entrepreneurial activities. In 2007, Rothermel et al. Did a full taxonomy of literature focusing on university entrepreneurship, and they incorporated quite a lot of different things into that taxonomy. And this is one of the, I'm not sure how fully illustrative it is or intuitive it is, but one of the summary figures in the paper was this figure trying to illustrate kind of the large spectrum of activities that are considered under the term university entrepreneurship. So we have the concept of the entrepreneurial university, which, depending on where you look, has been grounded in literature by Henry Eskowitz and others, focusing to some extent on this aspect that we already brought forward previously, that it's going beyond single research groups into larger activities, but maybe how those research groups operate outside of the realm of a normal research group. Also looking at the productivity of technology transfer offices. I think purposefully this taxonomy was done about 25 years after the Bayh-Dole Act in the US had been instituted, where responsibility of technology transfer was given to the universities themselves. So there became a lot of focus on how universities are taking on the responsibility of the third mission, a focus on new firm creation happening within the university sphere, and also considering sort of the context within which universities are situated as contributors to innovation. So this is one way that we could start to, I don't know if it zooms down, but give us some kind of boundaries of how we might consider entrepreneurial activity at the university. It's pretty, it reaches rather broadly. Another way we could think about entrepreneurial activity at the university is also to think about which types of actors are actually involved. And so when we think about entrepreneurial activity, who do we think about, or what organizations do we think about? This is a slide from our innovation office here at Chalmers that kind of just maps out who are the different actors in our entrepreneurial ecosystem. And you can really see it's a whole spectrum of individuals and organizations, both situated within the university, but also associated to the university or in collaboration with the university. And it also maps out actually some activities as well. So things like business plans, competitions, and centers for excellence could be both an organization, but also articulating kind of a process. So we have a lot of different potential people involved in this that we might associate to a university. And when further literature is looked into this, thinking about sort of the process of academics specifically, there's been recognition of it, sort of a shift from a more traditional perspective into a more emergent perspective. So going from this more maybe singularly focused emphasis on technology transfer with some kind of commercial return, where it's primarily about licensing out research and academic spinoffs, primarily facilitated with and through technology transfer offices and the academic faculty, to a focus on a wider spectrum and a wider reach. So a wider objective of creating benefit for society through commercialization, or for a while at Chalmers, we had the terminology utilization, so utilization of research as a third mission objective, including then more individuals associated to the university and activities connected to them. So thinking not just about academic spinoffs, but also student and alumni startups, and involving then students and alumni in these processes. And with that came on that universities were having different types of organizations and activities to help facilitate this above and beyond either innovation offices or technology transfer offices. This paper by Siegel and Wright is from 2015, and I think it's now almost 10 years old. So I think this emergent perspective has continued to emerge, and a little bit what Mats and I kind of are trying to unpack in the 25-year case study that we have in the paper is a next kind of stage of a perspective where instead of the entrepreneurial activity still being kind of associated singularly to distinct individuals, either a student startup or an alumni startup or an academic startup, and situated at the periphery of the university through accelerators or garages or specifically business plan competitions for students, looking at a more combined or integrated set of mechanisms. So in the paper, in the article, we define the entrepreneurial university building upon the definition from Guerrero Cano et al., where the entrepreneurial university is defined as having the ability to innovate, recognize and create opportunities, work in teams, take risks, respond to challenges on its own, seek to work out substantial shift in organizational character so as to arrive at a more promising posture for the future. So in other words, which I think is good that they say that, it's a natural incubator that provides support structures for teachers and students to initiate new ventures, intellectual, commercial, and conjoint. So importantly, including intellectual here as well. So it's not just an emphasis on commercial activity. But that definition is quite formal and quite focused, and we in the paper wanted to also bring in more informal factors that's been grounded in literature, including student attitudes towards entrepreneurial activity and entrepreneurship in general, and entrepreneurial culture of a university, and how that kind of embeds into how that's incentivized in the university environment. And we kind of argue that, along with support from literature, that it's these formal and informal combined that really can start to illustrate the intrapreneurial capability of the university. So we also tried to unpack, if we look at entrepreneurial activity at the university, and we try to look at that more specifically, including not just academics, but also students, what are the types of activities that we have in place that are softer and maybe less commercial versus those that are more focused, formal, and commercially oriented. And Philpott, we build from Philpott et al. that talks about 7 sort of main entrepreneurial activities at the university, 3 being more specifically anchored from a research or to the first mission of the university connected to research, so an emphasis on competitive grants, contract research, and faculty consultancy. So that's a very soft kind of transfer of knowledge to society, where there's an intended commercial objective or an intended utility for commercial activity. From an educational standpoint, the focus and development of entrepreneurship education that would prepare students for engaging in entrepreneurship, either to learn about it, to learn and prepare for entrepreneurial activity after graduation, or to even engage students in entrepreneurship as part of their education. And activities focused on the third mission, so including student entrepreneurship as new forms of entrepreneurial activity, including those that are socially oriented, but also then your traditional technology transfer types of activities such as patenting, licensing, and so forth, as well as university spinoffs. And here engaging not just the academics, but also bringing in others, so in a surrogate format. What's important again here is to consider that only 2 of these sort of specifically engage students as part of the activity. The rest are more oriented towards faculty, but all of these are still in line with Philpott, focusing on that it's individual or small groups that, from a sort of bottom-up individual engagement, are facilitating the entrepreneurial activity at the university. So these are not strategically top-down designed activities. These are very much connected to the actors. The entrepreneurship education as an educational deliverable to as part of the educational structure of the university might be a slight caveat to that. So we wanted to look at, particularly through the School of Entrepreneurship, the way in which the case had built upon these types of entrepreneurial activities going on in the university, and to understand how did they become institutionalized? How did they become an intrapreneurial capability at the university that was allowed and recognized? So we when we were in the early stages of the paper, we were trying to think about, are we looking for some kind of strategy development, or what are we really looking at? And we realized, no, we're really trying to understand how these activities became legitimate. So how are they normalized, or how are they allowed or normalized into the university infrastructure? And so we went to Sushman and his typology of legitimacy to look at both the actions and also sort of the essence behind the actions, in order to understand that there's different types of legitimacy processes going on here, and that these can be both episodic in the sense that they can be one-off activities and very singular in their event and legitimized at that point, or they can be something that is continually being done and then over time emerges as something that's recognized as legitimate. And so I think it's important to remind us of what do we mean by legitimacy then. So legitimacy as a generalized perception or assumption that the actions of an entity are desirable, proper, or appropriate within some socially constructed system of norms, values, beliefs, and definitions. So here we have the norms, values, beliefs, and definitions of the university, these 3 missions that are articulated, and then how are the specific entrepreneurial activities becoming normalized and seen as desirable, proper, or appropriate within this context. So this was the lens that we used to analyze the activities of the case. So you're saying, okay, the case is 25 years of the School of Entrepreneurship. What is the School of Entrepreneurship? This is a picture I think we've had. It certainly predates me, and I've been working with the school for more than 20 years. And I've heard from Mats that this was kind of the initial imagery of how the school was conceptualized, recognizing this fundamental gap. In some literature, it's called the Valley of Death, between research and society or the business arena. And behind the research, we have the researchers and academics that can bring commercial or research that has a applicable value to a certain level within a certain period of time. There probably should be a longer timeline there as well, because depending on the type of research, it might take quite a long time just to get to a commercial viability point. But quite often, the business arena isn't ready to just adapt and take over that research. Quite often there's this gap. And the researchers, yeah, you have some academics that are willing to, alongside of their activity, become academic entrepreneurs and take on the responsibility of driving a new firm or engaging in entrepreneurial activity outside of their already busy role of faculty at university, but that's not the norm of academics. And the business world can only come back so far to pick up these technologies. So why not utilize that space as a learning environment to teach students about a venturing process by engaging them in that venturing process. So this was the concept of the School of Entrepreneurship. Put individuals in that space where they can both learn about the process, learn through experience, which is a very powerful type of learning, and at the same time can be carriers of the development of the research to a point where it might be interesting and viable in a business context. What that more specifically looked like is the figure on the left-hand side of the screen. This is actually from my dissertation, so it's quite old as well, but I think it still stands that you basically would have a school where one component of the school is specifically a master's program in, for, or through entrepreneurship. We could put different prepositions there, but partnering together with some kind of commercial actor that can facilitate the commercial activity, the incubation activity, that would be necessary to make this actually real firms moving towards that business space. And together, those two units support the development of potential ventures and allowing students to be embedded as venture teams together with idea providers. So the researchers or other actors coming out, either spitting out university technology or spinning through technology through the university, partnering with student teams and together developing these ventures forward, and then supported by an entrepreneurial network or role set. It would be both academic, but also sort of the entrepreneurial ecosystem set of actors. So that is a very simplistic illustration of the construct of the school. But what we have on the right-hand side of the screen is also sort of the different types of parameters and learning objectives that the school really embodies as well. So the top figure is really emphasizing that this is not education to develop ventures, but education to develop entrepreneurial competency, and that competency is developed through engaging in a venturing process, hence the role of a surrogate, student as surrogate of the ideas. And through that process of taking on ownership and development of university research for commercialization, they can learn entrepreneurship, the art, and I have a specific word in mind that is hiding from my brain right now, but learning this practice of entrepreneurship by engaging into it. And through that, they really build this competency. So not just the knowledge for entrepreneurial engagement, but also how and why they want to engage. So also the skill set and actually the type of attitude or approach to engaging, because then it becomes personal to them and they can take that forward with them beyond the educational space and potentially beyond that singular venture. And in the bottom is just additional findings from research together with my colleague, Martin Lacaeus, looking at defining this type of learning where you use the venture as the learning vessel. You know, how is that contributing to technology transfer? How is that contributing to taking university research to society? So these help to explain even further sort of what the school is and how it works and what it intends to do. So I'll just walk us through the case that is presented in the paper. And we present the case in 4 stages because there's been sort of distinct periods of development of the school, and kind of connected to that, as I said, through the lens that we used, we really identified different ways in which specific entrepreneurial activity was legitimized through the actions of the school, and how that impacted and was really brought into the university as a whole. So as I said, the school was founded in the premise of bridging between research and society and commercial practice. And so that's really fulfilling a fundamental third mission role of university spinouts, but doing that by connecting an entrepreneurship education with university commercialization. So here there's already from the start an intention of combining 2 of the missions of the university. And this team-based surrogate approach, so not students starting their own startups, which is a more common form of venture creation at university, but instead being connected with research and the researchers commercializing the research and becoming the surrogate of taking that forward. Is a pretty specific design that both allowed the students to, in one sense, have an emphasis on their learning. So students are always appreciative of the experience, but it's not, they don't have to come up with sort of some of the ingredients for moving things forward. They're being able to apply learning to an object that's coming through the education, and it's the application of that knowledge, and then their learning connected with engaging in that process. That is the competency that they're developing. So that means that importantly, there's a little bit of a disconnect between the object and the learning, which makes it easier for the learning to be recognized and appreciated in the university space. And also, it still can facilitate a focus on only pushing through the things that would be successful, but decoupling the success from the learning process. So that helped to have kind of a pragmatic legitimacy, where there was absolutely the potential of spinoffs being generated through this process, but that wasn't connected to the educational deliverable specifically. The students were kind of guaranteed a degree that wasn't explicitly contingent on success. So that kind of built in a moral legitimacy. And there was, after a couple iterations of this, already recognition of this model being functional. So that started to build sort of the ground for a cognitive legitimacy that, okay, this model makes sense and it's actually working. There were some glitches though, and the details of that are in the paper, but one of the main things was recognizing in the very early stage of this, there wasn't a specific commercial actor that sort of supported the commercial activity of the commercialization of the university spinoffs, and that was a little bit problematic because it was a quite early process, and people had to get used to this new type of practice. So in the second stage of the education, the emphasis was on establishing an incubator that could really facilitate sort of the commercially complex components and relieving that from the educational side, establishing the program as a master's program that went beyond engineering, because initially it was exclusively for students at Chalmers, and we expanded to include other backgrounds, recognizing that there needed to be, from our understanding of entrepreneurial activity, we need multiple perspectives, we need multiple skill sets. There's components beyond just an engineering understanding to help commercialize. So those were brought in to support the activity. So then, and specifically a focus on intellectual property management being a quite important component to have in place for early stage venturing. So that again brought in a pragmatic legitimacy of having a specific actor responsible for certain aspects of the process, and decoupling that from, not decoupling it from the education, but being clear about where the responsibility was placed. Again, a kind of a moral legitimacy of expanding the knowledge base that was necessary for the development of the ventures and the students' learning around entrepreneurship. And again, a cognitive legitimacy in bringing in fundamental competency areas that were really vital to the process. The third stage of the case really focused on recognizing and validating this model. So this model had been implemented, it had been practiced and sort of organized through the second stage in a way that made it work in a pragmatic means, but now there was a need to build ground for understanding why the object that was working, why was it working, and how can we validate this even in research. So we initiated research about the process of student surrogate entrepreneurship and comparing the specific context of the school with other contexts to understand why is a student surrogate model, what are the benefits and challenges with that, and how is that working. And that was, independently validated through peer-reviewed research. The school also went under different evaluations as well and was recognized for the model and the process that was being in place. That helps secure additional funding to support this type of activity, because it's, of course, more expensive than a standard master's process, given the number of actors involved in the complexity of integrating education and incubation activities, but also trying to maintain these important factors that are part of university learning, that we wanted to have a balanced student body. We wanted to have routines that matched the institutional requirements, and so that the learning was still translated into ways in which the university could recognize educational deliverables and other types of deliverables. So that again developed more and more cognitive legitimacy, because the specific and pragmatic aspects of the activity are being translated into aspects that the university infrastructure could recognize. And finally, the fourth stage, most recent stage, kind of is a transference of three stages that still sort of really center around the School of Entrepreneurship itself. And there's interface with actors in the greater ecosystem in the greater university context, but still a lot of these activities are centralized at the school, and now moving into how the school becomes part of a larger community, and is embedded and helping to constitute larger entrepreneurial activities at the university. So the first was that the third mission, commercialization actors that supported the spinning out of university research, the commercialization of university research, licensing activities and such, were consolidated into one organization called Chalmers Ventures. And that included the incubator that had specifically worked exclusively with the School of Entrepreneurship, now became a component of a larger organization called Chalmers Ventures. And that organization was also, Chalmers Ventures also was, instead of these different entrepreneurial activities facilitating commercialization, instead of those being sort of funded in a lot of disparate ways, there was now a centralized funding coming from the university to support this activity. So this was really symbolic of the university recognizing and taking responsibility for commercial activity that integrated and involved connectivity to all three missions of the university, and really standing for that and supporting that financially, but also in name and in process. This meant that components of the School of Entrepreneurship were appreciated, and there was desire for spreading this more broadly across the university. So in the details of the case in the paper, for example, this is taking the fundamental component of experiential learning that was really core and inherent to the School of Entrepreneurship, educational design, and thinking about how that could be implemented on a smaller scale, on a more adaptable scale to other educations across the entire university, so that more and more Chalmers as a whole university could offer some kind of entrepreneurial experience to all of its students, and not just students that went through this very specific master's program. Again, the design, the pedagogic design, but also the research coming out of the school was recognized externally, and that helped to, again, validate the practice and the model of the school, and also the pedagogy that was being utilized. And so then there was additional support from Chalmers as a whole, also towards the master's program, the Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship specifically. And these ideas of entrepreneurial activity and how that can be recognized, and engagement into student surrogate partnerships, and the ability to facilitate that as an offering that the university holds to external recruitments was in part recognized in faculty promotion. So again, here a lot of institutionalization and appreciation by the university as a whole of commercial activity that connected with educational and research missions of the university. So the key insights that we articulate coming from and through the 25-year case of Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship is really focusing on incentivizing faculty to do university spinoffs in a way that doesn't require them to take on an entire new sort of career as an academic entrepreneur, but rather to bring in additional actors to collaborate. So this concept of surrogacy, but allowing students to both learn through the process, but also take on this collaborative role, and having that being supported by a university ecosystem, entrepreneurial ecosystem that takes on some of the responsibilities for different specific activities through incubation and helping to support and guide that process. So that really allowed different actors to collaborate and also maintain focus on their core competency, and at the same time fulfilling the university of mission more and more of bringing research to society in a way that it's usable. It's also recognition and appreciation of specifically experience-based educational design, both in this very focused model of the School of Entrepreneurship, where the venturing is the vessel through which the learning is gained by the students, but also recognizing specifics within that model that could be applied to more project-based work or more time limited work and spread to other types of education that still allowed an experience base in it. So appreciation and distribution even of that design. There was also recognition and appreciation of how the combination of faculty and student engagement benefits and improves the commercialization. And this was validated through research that was also generated by studying the School of Entrepreneurship. Excuse me. And then also reducing the singular pressure of venture success so that the value of the learning and the research development are brought in. And this really means that there's lots of value that's developed through this process, and it doesn't hang up all the value on whether or not a venture is commercialized or not. And that really helped to mean that you could utilize the venturing process to help research development, to identify problems or identify areas that needed further development, or to pivot the focus of research. It facilitated learning in this particular type of experience-based learning that was very valuable as a competence that could be utilized not just in venture startup context, but actually in a broad spectrum of contexts. So supporting entrepreneurial activity in large innovative firms that have R&D development that also need commercialization processes. So all of a sudden the value add of this combination isn't just specifically third mission, but actually the value is contributing to the second and first mission as well. There's some pretty important considerations around this particular case. First of all, and that was our intended design as well, by building on the work of Bergelman and Philpott and others, was to focus on this bottom-up initiative, but then to recognize how that bottom-up initiative recognize the importance of mapping into institutional objectives, these three missions, and slowly through that process, gaining institutional support for doing this. And you can see that really took quite a long time. So it wasn't until there was episodes of institutional support through the different phases, but really the systematic institutional support really came clearly in the fourth stage. So the longitudinality of validating different aspects of the case had to occur episodically and over that time span before reaching the fourth stage. And that sort of required and also allowed for this incremental modeling through to really identify and validate what was working, and then to integrate that into university, sort of to have that institutionalized. So that's the first time I've run through a presentation of the paper. So thank you for being my inaugural group of presenting the paper too. It will be in print shortly in Technovation, but I thought we could take, if we have time, yeah, we have a minute maybe, but at least take with you these questions connecting to our paper. What kind of entrepreneurial activities take place in my university? Are they singularly situated in one of these three missions, or maybe at the periphery of the university, and or are they integrating with other missions of the university? And how might there be capabilities of translating into more university-wide entrepreneurial capabilities? And maybe what kinds of, where do these types of activities gain legitimacy in our context? Because that was really an important question for us to ask in the paper. Sorry, I didn't intend to speak this long, so I wanted to leave time for questions, but
thank you so much, Karen. I think it was great to hear what happened in the past 25 years and what lessons you drew from that experience. I had a question, but I think in the interest of the questions from the participants, I'll skip that. And Magnus had the first question, which is perceived commercial value still relevant, or has it changed along with your view on legitimacy or something else?
So I think that's a really good question. And I think initially the very first, in the first stage, and we write about this in the paper, the objective was venture. I mean, we call even the model of the program the venture creation model, and there was always the point of, yeah, of course, we're going to try our best to generate successful ventures, but that wasn't the singular objective. But I think if we hadn't validated that that was possible, then the other values wouldn't necessarily have been as much appreciated. At this point in time, and I think for some, maybe for a decade now, we've been trying to be quite clear that from the school's point of view, the Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship's point of view, the primary objective is entrepreneurial competency development. But of course, we know that through delivering that, there's some sort of natural, there naturally comes commercialization of ventures every year. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. And thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, and so there are two questions from our Japanese colleagues, actually, and I think maybe you could just answer them in combination with each other. So the first question is from Shingo, and he asks, Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship has been gradually improved into 4 stages. And who decided that the situation needed to change, or did it just transition naturally? And Megumi asked, through stages of 1 to 4, how did you raise awareness of your program among students? Because students tend to go to jobs in larger corporations and consultancy firms instead of unpredictable startups. How did you tackle with students' traditional career path?
Yeah. So I think I'll take the second question first. And I think that there is a point that we are at a technical university. And I think a lot of our students, and particularly it started first exclusively as a master's program for Chalmers students. And what I've heard over and over again from students that are applying to our program and coming into our program with an engineering background is that they see in their engineering education the capability of developing new things, but they don't want to become, for lack of a better word, a lab rat. Like, they don't want that traditional engineering career that isn't managerial necessarily, that isn't, if you had an MBA program, that sort of trajectory. They really want more freedom to explore the innovative and creative side of their engineering. And so they saw this master's program as really sort of the space where they could both continue with the technological development side that they were interested in from their engineering degree, but also translate that. They were really interested in translating and creating value for others. And that's a terminology we've used quite a lot in the school. And I think that was certainly something that we built on from the start of the education, and is to address your question, Shingo, about the sort of need to have the stages come naturally, or have they been intended? I think it's been a mixture of both. So some things have been reactions to needs that have emerged once we've been practicing the initial model. And certainly the shift between stage 1 and 2 was, okay, we need to have some kind of organizational infrastructure for the packaging of these ventures, because if it's not structured in some way that can help manage the commercial side of it, there's a disconnect between the expectations of the different parties involved, and if there's not some kind of governance process for that, it can be pretty messy to try to figure out, and it takes a lot of time and energy to try to figure out how each and every process should emerge. So that, at least from stage 1 to 2, that was very much a kind of a reaction. And I think then moving in from stage 2 to 3 was recognizing that we had pragmatic legitimacy, we had validity in the terms of we were generating ventures all the time, but we needed to validate how we were doing that, because we were getting that question all the time. And we intuitively knew how it worked, but we wanted to really embody that. So part of the shift into stage 3 was to get also that research legitimacy of what we were doing, and those things packaged together really helped. The fourth, I would say, the transition into the 4th stage kind of it wasn't a triggering from us or a reaction from us. It was really the evolution of what the university recognized as important, or I would say that, again, the individual activity, those actors in the entrepreneurial community coming together and sort of articulating to the university leadership, we need a cohesive way of managing this, and we need the university to really take responsibility holistically around these activities, because there's a lot of distributed activities going on. So there was a sort of a unit, like a community that came together and really argued for that transition. It was a bit simplistic, but I would say that's how the stages emerged.
Okay, excellent. I think we're a little bit over time, so probably we can wrap up the session. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your insight. And I hope you guys will be able to make time to join us in the next webinar, which will be on 2nd of April. And Mike from NTNU will share some insights from some of the research projects that she's part of. And I think that's all for today. And thank you all for participating in this webinar. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Anmar. And I hope you guys have a great day and a great weekend. Take care.
Thank you so much, Tushar. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.